Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm going to hand it off to Governor Ritter. Go ahead. Please.
Thanks, Mari. I just want to add my own thanks to everybody who has been here all day, and hopefully you'll come back tomorrow. As Mari said, there's a public reception after this, following this panel here. And as you can see, a group of us that sort of sat down to try and think about energy transitions started with grand challenges, and it's been a fairly wide variety of topics today, and I think just excellent speakers, and we're really happy. We have a great keynote speaker tonight as well, Amory Levins, who's here and present, and I'm going to have the privilege, after he speaks, of facilitating that. So anyway, the cybersecurity thing was so cheerful that we thought we would follow it up with something that's a little, no. What happens here is that we thought about, many of the grand challenges, and certainly one of the things that we need to talk about in the United States of America is the role natural gas is playing in this energy transition. I think one of our speakers earlier alluded to the fact that so much of this transition that's happening has to do with the low price and long supply chain of natural gas. We're going to have additional discussions about that tomorrow. We're going to have 3 governors on the stage at the same time that have been impacted by low prices of natural gas and who have entire industries that have been impacted in their states by the low price of natural gas. But this is going to be about something a little bit different. And I'm going to introduce my panelists really quickly and talk about why this is a little bit different, and then go to the questions. So we have with us 3 different panelists. Robert LeCounte to my far left. He's the Executive Vice President of MJ Bradley and Associates. So MJ Bradley is sort of an economic strategy group that does a lot of different work on energy and environment systems around the United States. And when our center was doing work with 13 Western states on the Clean Power Plan, MJ Bradley was very helpful around the United States in trying to think about how states could meet their obligations under the Clean Power Plan. Secondly, we have Kate Fay, who's to my immediate left, and Kate is the Environmental and Regulatory Policy Manager for Noble Energy. She's been with the Department of Public Health and Environment when I was governor, but she was also at the Environmental Protection Agency prior to going to Noble, so she's had this great career where she spans both energy and environment issues. And then we have the Senior Vice President of Gas at Xcel Energy. She is Cheryl Campbell, and provides a utility perspective on this issue having to do with natural gas. So any of you from the Front Range of Colorado certainly have followed a lot of the issues around state permitting and local control of natural gas, and probably have a pretty good sense about the need for us to continue that conversation, and even for industry to think about their role in trying to, I think, solve some of the issues that have to do with impacting local communities. And MJ Bradley contacted us and said, listen, we would like to come to your symposium and roll out a report. And the report is really the product of a collaborative that it's called the Natural Gas Supply Collaborative, and that really deals with things that the industry can do to, in many respects, be better at transparency and accountability. So what I'm going to do here is ask Rob to spend a little bit of time introducing us to this collaborative and to the report. Then we'll go to Cheryl and ask Cheryl to talk about why Xcel Energy, which is a member of the collaborative, wanted to be involved in that, and then to Kate to talk about what industry's role may be in responding to this report and this group of recommendations really about metrics that might help the gas industry in way of transparency and accountability. So Rob, would you please talk to us first about what is the Natural Gas Supply Collaborative, and then secondly, a little bit about this report.
Fantastic. Thank you, Governor Ritter. It's great to be with you today. It's great to be back to the symposium again, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you today about the collaborative and the report we're rolling out. Maybe first, just a few words on the Natural Gas Supply Collaborative. It is a group of natural gas purchasers that have come together with the focus on looking to promote safety and responsibility around natural gas supply practices. And what is kind of building off of a number of the themes that I think we're hearing here at the symposium is with the energy transition taking place, one of the themes is obviously an important role of natural gas, but it's also a stronger desire by customers in both taking more control on their energy use, but also more of an understanding on their energy impacts. And that's really what a key theme about this initiative is. This is a group that came together really organically, talking to a number of the companies that we work with that are natural gas purchasers, and we're looking to more actively engage constructively on issues around and questions that stakeholders have on the impacts of natural gas supply. And so this group is 9 companies that came together, and it's a mix of natural gas utilities and also power generators, and then we have some combined electric and gas utilities. I think it's important just to briefly mention the 9 companies. We're representing really across the United States with a big footprint in the West as well, but it's Austin Energy, Calpine Corporation, Con Ed of New York, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, National Grid, NRG Energy, Northwest Natural, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Xcel Energy. And our focus as the Supply Collaborative is coming together really to promote greater transparency around environmental issues and sustainability issues. And so today we're rolling out a report that has been literally a couple years in the making when you think back to when the conversation started. And in this report, what we're identifying are some key environmental and social performance indicators. And what we mean by that are key questions that both the natural gas purchasers have as well as their customers and stakeholders have regarding the practices that are used for natural gas production. And so the objectives of this group coming together is really to promote transparency. This group is coming together to highlight these performance indicators and to encourage natural gas producers to provide more information around these questions that are in this document. And in this process, it's certainly recognizing that the industry has advanced considerably over the last few years as this is a new resource that has been developed, and when we're talking about unconventional gas supply. And we have seen tremendous advancement in terms of the types of practices and measures that are used to protect the environment. And we've also seen significant improvement in terms of the level of public disclosure about information on those practices. That being said, we see an opportunity for continued improvement here, and that's where the group came together to say we have an opportunity to really highlight these leading practices that are in place, but to bring more attention to that and encourage even more information for the customers of the Natural Gas Supply Collaborative partners, as well as for their customers and stakeholders. And just a couple comments on that. From the perspective of the participants in this initiative, the questions really do represent significant business needs. It helps to address specific business needs, meaning that with greater information about the supply chain, we have greater information in terms of understanding where the supply is coming from and the practices that are used. It's providing more information that then the participants have to make available to their customers and their stakeholders. And then finally, it helps the participants to also implement and execute their own sustainability goals, both for internal goals for their companies, but also as they look more and more into the supply chain. Now, this is a process that many companies across the country and many industries have been doing for some time, is taking more of a, looking for more understanding of their own supply chain, and the utilities and companies we're working with have been doing that. Here's the evolution of that moving to natural gas. And so it's a significant step with this today. A couple things just to highlight is, one, the program is not intended to be a new reporting program. There are many reporting frameworks that play an important role out there. In this case, what we're asking for is for information to be made publicly available. So we're asking for natural gas producers to share this information through whatever means they currently use for providing this kind of data. So it would be through their own websites and existing sustainability reports. So we're not asking for that to be reported in terms of a new system, but really having that to be more accessible, to be more thorough, and to be easily available for all types of stakeholders and customers. So finally, just a couple points in terms of where do we go from here. So today we're launching this, we're putting this information out. We went through a process of significant engagement with natural gas producers in developing and identifying these performance indicators, but also with other types of stakeholders. We put out a draft earlier this year and received very thoughtful feedback, and that really helped to shape the final report. But today with the launch, it's really just, in many ways, the first step. And so going forward, we look forward to continuing the conversation, to engaging more directly with broader population of the natural gas upstream industry, natural gas producers, as we work to raise awareness around these types of questions and to look to build upon the report and to further work toward highlighting the types of leading practices that we've identified in this report.
Just off the top of your head, do you know where they can go on the web to find the report? What's the web address?
Yeah, absolutely. The site is to go to MJ Bradley, and we have a specific page set up that is the Natural Gas Supply Collaborative. And so we have flyers throughout the room that have information that summarizes the one-pager, and it has a link to take you there as well. And we also have, for those that may be watching on the web link, we have, with the website today on the conference, we have that information put up to directly take you to the site.
So what your recommendations are on performance indicators, they deal with methane in air, with water, with chemical use, and then with really what you call community and safety, which I think probably for people who've had experiences here in Colorado would be sort of the aspects around local control or the operators who are operating in places in proximity to neighborhoods. How are operators dealing with those communities to ensure that everybody is sort of satisfied with whatever memorandum of understanding is produced or whatever series of operation protocols are produced? Is that fair?
That is, and a key point on that is that in terms of the practices used in the process for natural gas production, it's a complex process. It requires many types of practices that would be used to manage the process. And what we try to do, this is not a comprehensive list of all the types of safety measures that one would use. What we've tried to do here in asking these questions is really to highlight the perspective of natural gas purchasers and our stakeholders in terms of what are the key questions that we're hearing. And so we've tried to develop a succinct list that really hits some of the priority topics across the 4 categories that you've mentioned. On community, what we have done is really wanted to highlight the important role of community engagement. And the other piece of this is that within the indicators, we've also stressed the importance of comprehensive and in many cases the type of data that companies would use to measure how both their performance in terms of the practices and then also the results, the impacts. And in this case, on community engagement, what we've really asked to see is how is one being more quantifying the process of engaging, taking the input in for communities and doing that type of proactive outreach on key issues for communities.
Thanks. So Cheryl, Xcel Energy is both generating power from natural gas and combined cycle turbines. You also have about 1 million customers that are natural gas customers with heating into the home, if I'm right about that. And so you're a big user of natural gas, but the other utilities that he mentioned that are participating in this are fairly significant across the country. Why did Xcel, or why do you as a company, as a utility, decide that you want to participate in this collaborative, and what do you think then after having participated about the report?
Sure, and we have about 1.6 million customers here in Colorado, 1.9 million across our system. So natural gas is a very important part of our portfolio, and the reality is it's a very inexpensive way to heat people's homes, right? So we probably have about, I don't know, a couple 100,000 customers who are on income assistance, and gas is by far and away the cheapest way to heat their homes, and it works really well for them. So we're very interested in this energy source. It's also very much a key part of our generation portfolio. We have quite a bit of renewables and are headed for more, but you still have to balance all of that. You have to balance when the renewables generate and when people are using the power. And natural gas is a great way for us to do that. So we're very interested in it as a fuel source into the future. We think it's environmentally sound. And it does a lot for our customers, keeping prices down for both our gas and our electric services. Now, why did we jump on board? I've been working with Rob for, 2 or 3 years now on a variety of different topics, and we get questions pretty regularly from customers. What ends up happening, my friends on the producing side, right, people don't know how to get to them, so they call Xcel Energy, and they say, are you buying gas that's been fracked, or are you buying gas that's sustainable, or are you buying whatever? And, it got very clear to us that we needed to find a better way to answer that than the way we've answered it in the past. So come to find out, we weren't the only utility getting these kinds of questions. And all of the companies that Rob listed there, we've worked with in various ways over the years. And we decided that we needed to try and build on some very positive work we've seen done here in Colorado around testing water, right, before and after fracking. Hey, can't we be more transparent about some of these things and let people know that this really is working and these companies are working hard to be environmentally sound, safe in their operations. And so that was why it was really important to us.
So, kind of in the conversations with other utilities that are part of this, is there any way that you will utilize your corporate ability to leverage companies to do this? Rob said there's not going to be something that they're recommending goes into some reporting protocol that's part of the rules of gas producing, oil and gas production in a state. But is there going to be any leverage? Is there anything that a corporation might do or a utility might do to leverage it?
At this stage of the game, we're not changing our purchase strategies or our practices. We are a big believer in that transparent reporting. If you look at our corporate sustainability report, you'll see that we report on these same issues. We're working hard to keep our gas system safe and to tighten it up even further and reduce our emissions. We think that that's the right path. So do we pass on this information and let our producer partners know what we're hearing? Yes, we do. So I think I'm also personally a big believer in, the more transparency and visibility we have, the less regulation you have in the long run, right? And it's a lot easier for me to operate in a safe and cost-effective manner if I don't have a lot of those regulations. Some of them are good and some of them are not. I mean, that's just the way it is. So we share the information with our producers and the people that we buy gas from. We let them know what we're hearing. And, I think that over time it will become just sort of one of those evolving things where people will see that it's the right thing to do to be more transparent and report on a lot of this stuff.
Thanks. Kate, Noble Energy is an international oil and gas producing operation, have gas operations all over the world, but a big one in Colorado. And I think at one point in time we were one of the biggest plays for Noble, your Colorado play. You've also done a lot here with Colorado State University, with the Energy Institute, with our center, and with Ken Carlson on Colorado Water Watch. Why would a company look at this and say, okay, this isn't something we're required to do. If we do it, it's going to be voluntary. Why would a company do that?
Well, Cheryl, you just used the words that I was going to start with, which is great. No, it's good. First and foremost, it's the right thing to do, and it really is. We don't need to be doing this, but we want to be doing this. And we want to continue to be innovative. I recall being in a meeting in Washington a couple of years ago with the administrator of EPA, who I actually used to work with, and she said, if there's one thing the oil and gas industry does well is innovate. And we do it, and we do it for different reasons. Obviously, our own reasons to become more efficient, to become more effective, to make more money, but also to become more responsible and find solutions. And so, for example, when we were involved a couple of years ago in air quality regulatory efforts, part of that effort was to become responsible and to take some of the work that we've done with CSU and ourselves and understand better how to, in that case, reduce certain air quality emissions, air emissions. We've jumped on the indicator or performance indicator opportunities in a number of situations, even before I knew Rob. Performance indicators actually offer a way, I think, for the oil and gas industry and anybody who is responding to the indicators to be more clear and transparent. And in many cases, it's a way to message information we already have to different audiences, not to necessarily just to the regulators or to ourselves, but to tell a story about how what we do that gets into the supply chain in producing natural gas is accomplished. What are the innovations? What are our best practices? And to tell that story also to our investors. They are a very important part of the community, as is the community that we work within. So to pick up on one of Bill's points a moment ago, we worked with CSU to develop and participate in an effort for real-time monitoring of water quality. Nobody said we had to do that, but it was a way for us to better understand and explain how we operate and how we pay attention to any changes in water quality and protect the water supply system. There are two other really, I think, important reasons for us to be motivated to participate in these kinds of performance efforts, and we have been. One is these metrics count. They count to the communities where we work. They count to the regulators. They count actually internally. By participating in these efforts, even inside a company, you start to build a culture of awareness and environmental awareness and a desire to comply. That you start to get people to understand why, not just what we are doing, for those of us that work in the environmental arena. So I think there are a host of reasons why we would jump on this. I would say also that engaging with the companies or the entities that develop these indicators is very important, because just like they do, we want to get these right. We want the questions to be the right questions so that we are able to answer fully and transparently how we do our business so people can understand it better, and if they still don't understand, then we have some more work to do.
So, Rob, back to you. When we talk about the natural gas industry or the oil and gas industry, there's a range of players in that industry, from very large corporations, many of which work with, the government entities, the regulators, to get the regulations right, and then there can be other folks who resist regulation at the other end of the spectrum. If it's not something that winds up being mandated through a regulatory process, how does it become normative behavior? Or is there an expectation here that it becomes normative behavior if it's not a mandate, if it's not part of a formal regulation?
Yeah. Well, thank you. A couple points on that. One is from the participants in the supply collaborative that we're working with. The goal here is to raise the bar. So the interest isn't to just focus on a handful of natural gas producers, but all of the companies are connected in the supply chain. And so we're looking at it more from the supply chain than necessarily even individual producers. So what we'd like to have is that kind of more robust reporting from all operators. We think that all companies operating in the supply chain have a role to play here. And that, by the way, isn't just upstream, but that's all segments. And the supply collaborative companies have certainly been focusing on these areas of reporting as well. So that's one. But also with it, when we think about the companies, natural gas producers here, we do recognize that companies are at different stages of their own processes for voluntary reporting. We have some companies that are very much leaders in this space, and in fact, when we developed, and I say developed, but really it's identified the performance indicators, because we didn't come up with any new questions. What we really did is looked at the landscape of the work that's being done out there and said, what are the questions that are most pertinent really to the issues that the purchasers hear about and what they're hearing from their stakeholders. And so we really identified and wanted to prioritize those questions and look to see, are folks doing this? And there are examples of all the questions that we're asking that there are leading companies today that are providing this information. Our goal then is to make that, raise awareness of it and to expand the population of companies that are providing that kind of information. The other goal, though, with the framework that we've put out is that a number of the questions are designed to be pretty flexible. And so our hope is that for a company that's just getting started, that there are some steps that they could be doing that pretty easily, off of existing reporting data that they may have, but not making it accessible to the public, are steps that they could be doing that would be really a big improvement of raising the level of transparency. So our goal is that it really would be available for all companies, and that there's that hopefully this input helps to improve upon how all the different types of producers, given all their sizes and areas of production, could benefit from this.
So we have less than 3 minutes left. This is a shortened program, a shortened session. So I'm going to ask Cheryl and Kay both the same question, which is really what kinds of efforts can you do, Cheryl, in the utility industry and Kay in the oil and gas industry to get at this normalization, to get to a place where we have a culture of compliance, even if it's voluntary compliance. First, for utilities worrying about the supply chain, Cheryl, and then Kay for oil and gas producers.
Well, actually, I think we can do a lot. I mean, we can be very transparent in our own reporting, and as I said, we do report on these same items in our corporate sustainability report. And then, as we interact with our producers and the people we buy gas from, and others in the community, I sit on the COGA board here in Colorado. They'll probably tell you I'm pretty vocal about some of this stuff, about continuing to get better and to be more transparent with people. So it's influence and leadership, right, is really what we're trying to do.
What about at the national level with EEI or something of that nature? Can you take it there and say, here's a recommended practices for your supply chain?
And we do, actually. While I don't participate in EEI, I am a member of the Executive Committee for AGA, and I also sit on the DOT's Pipeline Advisory Committee. So I end up talking to a lot of people in the natural gas supply chain, and we do talk about this kind of stuff.
Thanks. Kate?
Well, I think we continue to work with each other. We lead. We don't just manage every problem as it comes along. We've already started to engage. The industry has engaged in this. If you actually look at some of the other metrics reporting reports, like Disclosing the Facts, if I may, which you've worked with as well, you can see the participation is going up in these voluntary programs. And I think we need to keep showing that they do matter and keep building on them. And I think engaging with the people who this is meant for, in addition to our own companies, like I said earlier, and make sure that the metrics themselves are designed to answer the questions that, in this case, you're asking, and to work really hard to make sure that we ultimately improve every year in not only the performance, but also what the end result of these kinds of efforts are.
Well, we're out of time. I wish we would have gotten to some audience questions, because I suspect there are audience questions. Hopefully you'll be around for the reception and people can address those to you during the reception. For right now, though, I'd like you to give them a round of applause for being here on stage and for their presentations. Thank you.
So we actually had 10 more minutes if you want it for questions. I mean, we do. I know. You're trying to mess with his head. We have about 10 more minutes if you'd like them.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do it.
And because it'll take a while to get the wall open anyway. So.
Hello. Okay, so we do have time for audience questions. The clock said 0, and I went by the clock, but 10 minutes. Yes? No, you need a microphone just because we web stream this or live stream it on the web.
I can ask a very simple question, but I've wondered all the time, so this is my opportunity. When I hear about people who are bothered with the pounding right next to their house, if they're too close, like 100 yards or something, we've seen some of those, and I always say that I know that you go underground miles. So why come so close to a house when you could be the 2,000 feet, which you fight, and just go down until you get where you need to be? I don't know why you need to drill right so close to houses. So is there a good reason?
So, Kate, do you want to take that, or do you want somebody else?
Well, I can speak for Noble. We actually, if you look at our footprint in Colorado, we are quite a bit further east than I think some of the areas you're talking about. That said, I think it's important to note, not being the geologist who actually does this, the drilling, the technology that has allowed us to move further from homes in places where there actually are homes has changed so dramatically. I mean, when I was working with Bill at the state, the discussions were about how far down vertically the wells could go only, and maybe a little bit of a diagonal reach. Today it is down and out quite a bit. There are more people, the prices are favorable to development, and the operators are all working together to try to figure out how to, with the state and with the communities, how to continue to move further and further from the urban zone.
When I've asked that question, the response has been typically something like, the geology very much underground can dictate where you have to ultimately locate a well, but also that we're putting a number of well bores on a single well pad, and in doing so, lessening the above ground impact and really lessening the impact on the viewscape, but the impact on the landscape certainly as well. And having it all concentrated in one place can reduce the nuisance activity. And so where that well pad is located is oftentimes dictated by where they want to reach. And so there's kind of a cost benefit of having the ability to put multiple wells. But I think, I really do think, we'll probably talk a little bit about this tomorrow as well. This is a remaining issue to solve, not just in Colorado, but in places around the United States where there's a lot of oil and gas drilling. There's still some questions about what we call the social license to operate among operators. And you've got Noble, who's probably one of the best operators in Colorado and in the United States, and doing a variety of things around sustainability. But you've got a range of practices and some real concerns on the part of citizens. Other questions? You, ma'am, in the black, and then sir, you behind. So.
I had a question, I think, for Cheryl. Do you foresee in the future, similar to how we have choices with food, whole food, local food, organic, et cetera, will I have that same option with utilities? If I want fracked Colorado gas as my supply for utilities, will I have that option?
That's really a great question. I mean, we've tried hard to identify, those kinds of offerings. What do our customers want, and can we find a way to provide it? Right? You hate to roll out. It's a big company with a lot of customers, but you do have to make sure it all fits, right? So how small can we get for the individual groups of customers, and still get it to all work together the way it's supposed to? So I think my answer to that is stay tuned. I mean, we are working very hard on finding packages that work for various segments of our customers, be it renewable or Colorado fracked gas, and make sure that people can have some choice around their utility service.
And it'd be fair to say that's a national conversation, so it's just not Excel and Colorado that's concerned about what we might call customer preference, but utilities around the country are thinking about whether or not that's part of what we call the 21st century business model.
I think that's fair, but I'm also gonna put on my Excel hat and say I like to think that we've been a leader in that. We had wind source before a lot of other people had wind source, or the ability to say I want wind power. So yeah, you're seeing it sort of move across the country, but we like to think we've been a leader in that.
Yes, Kate?
I think you bring up a very important point about sort of where does the molecule go. And it, to me, is one of the reasons these performance metrics are so important, because you can't actually track all these molecules. But you can help, through these, have the producing industry be part of the solution. And by paying attention to these life cycle metrics of whether it's water or air, safety, community engagement, any of those, that just raises awareness within the producers. And it allows us to raise that bar, be part of the solution while we're supplying until such time that you might be able to track that molecule.
Rob? One last piece on it is, and it ties back to a point earlier in terms of how will the participants use this information. And for the supply collaborative coming together, our goal was to really, the fact that we had a lot of companies that were interested in doing this, it made a lot more sense for them to work together and do this in a larger, transparent process rather than individual companies going off and coming up with their own questions. So our goal within the collaborative was really to come together with kind of the toolkit. What are the questions that we can develop through this process and make available to the public and natural gas producers? Where individual companies choose to take it is really the decision of the company. So our focus was, how do you develop a consistent set of concise questions here? And really then, because the companies are operating with different questions from their customers and stakeholders, how will they choose to use that and build it into their own business practices?
Thank you. So there's a gentleman.
This would probably be answered best by Kate, but the industry accepts 1,000 feet for safety and health reasons for wells and that from schools and hospitals. But then the child comes home and spends 18 hours in his house, and you demand that the same infrastructure be put 500 feet from his house. How do you explain that?
So, you want to answer it? 'Cause, well, I mean, again, I think I'm just going to defend Noble a little bit. When I was governor, we put in place a whole new set of regulations, and we redid the regulations altogether. And ultimately, most of the negotiations were with 3 or 4 companies, and Noble was one of them. So when you say the industry, there are certainly players inside the industry that will operate within, or fight against setback rules that are different than the 1,000 foot. But not everybody in that industry is the same as not everybody in the environmental movement, operate the same way. And so this setback rule has been a really interesting thing. It happened under Governor Hickenlooper after I left office. And there was just this really big debate. And ultimately they got to a place of saying, the Oil and Gas Commission saying, this is what we will utilize as our setback rule. It doesn't mean that everybody in the industry believes that's the right setback or uses that as the setback, but it's the minimum setback that people in the industry can use. And I think this is the place where citizen advocacy, citizen voices are so important, to address those questions to the commission, but also address them, in town hall meetings or in places where there is this sort of community intersection that Rob talks about and that they deal with in the report.
And I will simply say, having worked these topics from various perspectives, sort of thinking of it as at a table, that the conversation will always continue. The regulatory arena will be one of them. The community halls is another one. With the companies themselves, we want to continue to have those conversations. We work with the rules and regulations. We work with the communities, and I don't think we'll ever get to a point in any situation where you have people, industrial activity, growth, where we're ever going to answer every single question, but we need to continue the conversation and do it respectfully, as we are, and in depth, so that we can solve problems together.
It's really interesting to me, and I'm going to have the last comment because we have 16 seconds now. But when we redid the rules in 2007, 2008, we rewrote the statute. There was a lot of pushback from industry, but there was not a big conversation at the time about local control. And partly that was because the big issues were really up in the Piceance Basin. It's not uninhabited, but it's pretty sparsely populated. But as well, the Denver-Julesburg at the time and the Wattenberg were mostly out further east than where development is. And what's happened is we've had development west for the oil and gas operations, and then development east for residential. And we've seen those two things butt up against each other in a way that wasn't really true 10 years ago. And I think we have to solve that. I think we still have to solve this as a state. And one of those things, the setback rules, is part of trying to understand what's the right thing to do and how we solve that. But it takes citizen voices and an industry that's willing to be there at the table and collaborate and listen, and I think that's really what this report in part is about. So I recommend the report to you as a part of trying to solve just the kind of question that you addressed. Thank you very much.